I'm sorry. Did I do anything wrong?
The sachet burst open, and cold water hit Hana square in the face before she even understood what was happening. She gasped, her hands flying up too late, water streaming down her cheeks, soaking through her thin blouse, dripping onto the cracked pavement where her little folding table stood with its neat rows of pure water sachets. For a moment she just stood there, blinking against liquid she couldn't see through even if her eyes worked the way other people's did, her fingers trembling at her sides. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small, confused, searching. Did I do something wrong?" There was no answer at first, just the click of expensive heels on concrete, circling her slowly, like a predator deciding whether its prey was worth the effort. "Stay away from what's mine," the woman finally whispered, close enough that Hana could smell her perfume, something sharp and floral and expensive, the kind of scent that cost more than Hana made in a month. "I don't understand," Hana said, reaching out blindly, her hand finding nothing but air. "I don't know what you mean, I don't know you." "You will," the woman said. And then the heels clicked away, a car door opened, leather creaked, and an engine that purred like money pulled off into traffic, leaving Hana standing there soaked and shaking beside her overturned water sachets, her small business scattered across the sidewalk, strangers walking past without a second glance. Before you find out who that woman was and why she just humiliated a blind street vendor in broad daylight, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story only gets more intense from here. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, let's rewind. 3 weeks earlier, none of this had happened yet. Hana didn't even know Kang Min-Jae's name. Hana had been blind since birth. She had no memory of colors, no memory of faces, not even her own. She'd grown up in an orphanage on the outskirts of Seoul, one of those gray buildings that smelled like old paper and boiled rice, where children came and went but she always stayed, because who wanted to adopt a blind girl when there were so many other children who could see, who could run, who could be looked at without the person doing the looking feeling a pang of guilt? She'd learned early that pity didn't put food on the table. So the moment she turned 18 and the orphanage could no longer legally keep her, she'd found herself on the street with a bag of clothes, a cane, and absolutely nothing else. A kind vendor named Grandmother O had taken her in for a season, taught her how to fold sachets of purified water, how to count coins by their weight and shape, how to find her spot on the sidewalk near the intersection where thirsty commuters rushed by every morning and every evening. "You don't need eyes to sell water, child," Grandmother O had told her. "You need ears and a good heart and thick skin. The world will try you. Let it. You keep smiling anyway." Grandmother O passed away 2 years later, and Hana kept the stand going alone, because it was the only thing she had left of the only person who had ever loved her without conditions. Her days began at 5 in the morning, when she walked the same route to the water depot, counting her steps. 112 to the corner, 43 across the bridge, 60 more to the loading dock. Because a blind woman who doesn't count her steps is a blind woman who gets lost. And a woman like Hana couldn't afford to be lost. Not in a city this big, not with no one to come looking for her. She'd load her cart with sachets of water, wheel it to her corner, and set up before the sun had even fully risen. And then she'd wait, her ears tuned to footsteps, to the particular rhythm of someone slowing down, someone reaching for their wallet. "Ajima, 1 water, please," a young office worker might say, and Hana would smile and hold out her hand, feeling for the coins, and she always said thank you like it was the first sale she'd ever made. Not everyone was kind. Some days, teenagers would grab sachets and run, laughing, knowing she couldn't chase them, couldn't identify them, couldn't do anything but stand there listening to their footsteps fade and their laughter carry back to her on the wind. "Did you see that?" she heard one boy say to his friend once, not even bothering to lower his voice. "She's blind, she won't even know." "That's messed up," his friend replied, but he didn't stop him either. Nobody ever stopped them. Hana never confronted them. She never cried in front of strangers. She simply reset her table, straightened her spine, and waited for the next customer because bitterness was a luxury she couldn't afford any more than resentment was. If she let every theft, every insult, every moment of casual cruelty break something in her, she would have shattered years ago. So she didn't let it break her. She just kept going. "You're too kind for this world," an old man told her once, buying 2 sachets and pressing extra coins into her palm that she tried to refuse. "The world's been kind to me too, in its own way," Hana said, and she meant it, because she had her stand, she had her routine. She had the sound of the city moving around her like a heartbeat she'd learned to read better than most sighted people ever bothered to. She had no idea, on that particular Tuesday morning, that her entire life was about to collide, quite literally, with someone else's. It happened just after 4 in the afternoon. Hana was folding the last of her sachets into a neat pile when she heard it. The screech of tires, the horrible crunch of metal folding into metal, glass shattering, and then, underneath all of it, a silence that felt heavier than the noise that came before it. She didn't think. She just ran toward the sound, her cane sweeping in front of her, her heart hammering. "Somebody help," she screamed, her voice cutting through the stunned quiet of pedestrians who had frozen on the sidewalk, phones half raised, nobody moving. "Please, somebody call an ambulance. There are people hurt." Kang Min-Jae's convoy had been broadsided by a truck that came out of nowhere, jumping the median at a speed no ordinary driver would attempt. The lead car spun twice before slamming into a parked delivery van. The driver of the truck, later they'd find out he'd been paid. Though nobody knew that yet, least of all Hana, was already sprinting away from the wreck, disappearing into an alley before anyone thought to chase him. Hana reached the crushed door of the second car, the one carrying Min-Jae, and pressed her hands against the twisted metal, feeling for warmth, for breath, for anything. "Sir, can you hear me?" she said, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "Help is coming, just hold on. Please, just hold on." A man's groan answered her, faint, barely there. "That's it," she said. "Stay with me. What's your name? Tell me your name." "Min-Jae," he managed, blood in his voice and his breath. "Min-Jae," she repeated. "Okay, Min-Jae, my name is Hana. I'm not going anywhere, do you understand me? I'm right here." A passerby, a delivery driver who'd witnessed the whole thing, finally snapped out of his shock and rushed over with 2 other men. And together they managed to pry the door open enough to pull Min-Jae free, just as sirens began wailing in the distance. Hana kept talking to him the entire time, kept her hand on his shoulder, kept her voice low and calm even as chaos exploded around them, because she understood something that maybe only someone who'd spent her whole life in darkness could understand. That when everything else falls apart, a voice can be the only thing anchoring a person to the world. "You're going to be okay," she told him as the paramedics lifted him onto the stretcher. "You're going to be okay, Min-Jae." He didn't respond. He'd already lost consciousness. And Hana stood there on the sidewalk, water sachets forgotten, her hands stained with someone else's blood, listening to the ambulance doors slam shut and the sirens scream away into the city, having no idea that the man she'd just saved was one of the most powerful and dangerous men in Seoul. If this story has already got its hooks in you, smash that like button right now. It genuinely helps this video reach more people, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Comment below who you think that woman from the beginning really is. I'll be reading through them. At Seoul General, the trauma team worked for 6 hours straight to stabilize Kang Min-Jae. Broken ribs, a collapsed lung, internal bleeding they barely caught in time. A head injury serious enough that the attending doctor told the family, when they finally located someone to call, that the coming days would determine whether he woke up at all. The hospital's first call was to Seo-Rin, his fiancée. "Miss Seo-Rin, this is Seoul General calling regarding Mr. Kang Min-Jae. He's been in a serious accident. We need family here as soon as possible." "Is he going to die?" Seo-Rin asked flatly, the sound of a cocktail party humming behind her, glasses clinking, laughter rolling. "We can't say for certain at this stage, but his condition is critical." "Call me if something changes," she said, and hung up before the nurse could finish her sentence. She didn't come that night. She didn't come the next day either. She had a gala to attend, a business deal with a fashion conglomerate that had taken months to arrange, and Kang Min-Jae, unconscious and fighting for his life in a hospital bed, simply wasn't a priority that could be rearranged around. She said she'd try to stop by when her schedule allows. Min-Jae's assistant reported to the head nurse, unable to meet her eyes as he said it. Hana came every single day. She didn't know, at first, why she kept returning. She told herself it was simple decency. She'd been the one to find him, to hold his hand while he bled, and something in her couldn't just walk away and pretend that connection meant nothing. So after she closed her stand each evening, counting her earnings by touch, folding her table into its cart, she'd make the walk to the hospital, guided by a kind security guard who'd started recognizing her footsteps, and she'd sit by Min-Jae's bed and talk to him. "I sold out of water today," she told him one evening, her hand resting near his on the blanket, careful never to actually touch him without permission, even though he couldn't grant it. "A little girl bought the last sachet. She gave me a drawing instead of extra change. I obviously can't see it, but her mother described it to me. Apparently it's a cat or possibly a dog. The mother wasn't sure either." The machines beeped steadily beside her, the only response he could offer. "You should wake up," she said quietly, on a different night, a harder night, when the rain outside pounded against the windows and her own loneliness felt sharper than usual. "I don't even know you. I don't know what you look like, obviously, I never will. But I know your voice said my name like it mattered, so you should wake up and tell me the rest." The nurses noticed. Of course they noticed. "She's here every single day," one nurse whispered to another outside his room. "Rain or shine, and his fiancée hasn't set foot in this hospital once." "Some people have their priorities upside down," the other nurse replied, shaking her head. 3 weeks passed this way. Hana's routine simply expanded to include him, stand in the morning, evenings by his bedside, murmuring updates about her day into a silence that never answered back, though somewhere, in whatever place a person's mind goes when the body is fighting to survive, Kang Min-Jae was listening, in fragments, to a voice that refused to give up on him. And then, on the 21st night, his fingers twitched. "Min-Jae," Hana whispered, sitting up straight, her whole body going still. "Min-Jae, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, slow and unfocused, adjusting to the dim hospital light, and the first thing he registered was a woman's voice, warm and familiar even though he couldn't place why, saying his name like it was the most natural thing in the world. Where am I?" he rasped. "Hospital," Hana said, quickly pressing the call button for the nurse. "You were in an accident. You're safe now. Just breathe, okay? Just breathe." The nurses flooded in, checking vitals, calling for the doctor, and in the chaos of it all, Min-Jae's eyes found the young woman standing back near the door, giving the medical staff room to work, her hands folded in front of her. "Who is she?" he asked one of the nurses once the initial rush had settled, and the doctor confirmed he was stable, lucid, going to make it. "That," the nurse said, glancing toward Hana with something like admiration, "is the only person who's visited you every single day for 3 weeks. Your fiancé came once for 11 minutes. Min-Jae stared at Hana for a long moment, taking in the details his blurred vision could manage. Simple clothes, a cane leaning against the wall by the door, the calm, unassuming way she stood there, clearly still listening even though the room had gone quiet. "Come here," he said softly. Hana approached the bed carefully. "You should rest. You've been through a lot." "You stayed," he said. It wasn't a question. "Someone should have," Hana replied simply. "I wasn't going to just leave you there, not after everything." "Nobody else did," he said, and something in his voice cracked slightly around the edges, something that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. "Then their loss," Hana said. "Get some rest, Min-Jae. I'll be back tomorrow if you want me to be." "I do," he said, before she'd even finished turning toward the door. "I want you to be." 2 weeks later, the doctors cleared him for discharge, and true to her word, Hana had visited him every single day in between, their conversations growing longer, easier, filled with a strange comfort that neither of them had expected to find in a hospital room. On his last day there, Min-Jae had his assistant bring an envelope, thick with cash, and he held it out toward Hana before catching himself, remembering, and instead pressed it gently into her hand. "For everything you did," he said. "It's not enough, but it's something." Hana's fingers closed around the envelope, felt its weight, and immediately she held it back out toward him. "I don't want this," she said. "Hana, please, you saved my life." "I didn't do it for money," she said, and her voice had an edge to it now, something firm underneath the usual gentleness. "If you pay me, it means I helped you because I wanted something from you. I didn't. I helped you because you were a person bleeding on the ground and nobody else was doing anything. Please don't turn that into a transaction." Min-Jae sat there, the envelope suspended between them, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something close to shame. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You're right, I'm not used to people who don't want something from me." "Then maybe you've been surrounded by the wrong people," Hana said, and though she couldn't see his face, she heard the way his breath caught, just slightly, at her words. He insisted on driving her home instead, or rather, to the small rented room above a noodle shop where she'd been staying since grandmother O passed, and the car ride was quiet, comfortable in a way that surprised them both. "This is me," Hana said as the car slowed. "Thank you for the ride, and for surviving honestly. I was starting to run out of things to talk about." Min-Jae laughed, actually laughed, a real one, the first in longer than he could remember. "I doubt that very much." That night, back in the sprawling emptiness of his mansion, surrounded by staff who called him Sir, and never asked how he was actually doing, Min-Jae found himself unable to stop thinking about her. About the way she'd refused his money. About the steadiness in her voice when the world was screaming around them both. About Seo-Rin, who hadn't visited, who hadn't called more than twice, who had sent flowers with a card that simply read, "Get well soon, S." As though he were a distant colleague, and not the man she was supposed to marry. "Sir, will you be needing anything else tonight?" his housekeeper asked, finding him standing at the window, staring out at nothing. "No," Min-Jae said, "just thinking." "About Miss Seo-Rin." "No," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty of it. "Not about her at all." If you're enjoying this so far, don't scroll past without hitting that subscribe button. This channel is built on stories exactly like this one, and there's a lot more waiting for you. Drop a like, leave a comment, and let's keep going, because things are about to get a lot more complicated. Min-Jae couldn't stay away. He told himself at first that it was simple gratitude, a debt he wanted to repay in ways that didn't involve money since she'd made her feelings on that clear. So he found reasons to return to the intersection where the accident had happened, standing near the spot where his car had been crushed, scanning the sidewalk for a woman with a folding table and a cane, but her stand wasn't there. "She's not here today," he muttered to himself the first time, and the second, and by the third visit, frustration had started creeping into his voice. Where does she even set up? He finally found her on the fourth day, not at her usual corner, but near the water depot several blocks away. A heavy cart of fresh sachets balanced carefully as she navigated the crowded sidewalk with practiced confidence. "Hana," he called out, jogging to catch up to her. She stopped immediately, recognizing the voice instantly. "Min-Jae, what are you doing all the way out here?" "Looking for you, apparently badly," he admitted, slightly out of breath. "You weren't at your usual spot." "I restock on Thursdays," she said, amused. "You could have just asked me my schedule, you know, instead of wandering the city like a lost puppy." "I didn't have your number," he said. "I don't even know your last name." "Kim," she said. "Kim Hana, and you're Kang Min-Jae. I looked you up. Well, someone described what came up when they looked you up. You're kind of a big deal, apparently." "Does that change anything?" he asked carefully. Hana considered the question seriously, tilting her head. "Should it?" "I don't know," Min-Jae admitted. "It usually does with people." "I'm not most people," Hana said simply, and resumed walking, letting him fall into step beside her, carrying half her load without her even having to ask. He started visiting her stand regularly after that. Not every day. because his position demanded meetings, negotiations, the constant churn of running an empire that operated in both the legal world and the far more dangerous one beneath it. But often enough that Hana began recognizing the particular rhythm of his footsteps among the hundreds that passed her corner each day. "You're back," she'd say, smiling before he'd even spoken. "How do you always know it's me?" "You walk like someone who's used to people getting out of his way," Hana said. "It's a very specific rhythm, confident, unhurried. Most people rushing past me sound anxious. You never do." "That's either impressive or slightly unsettling," Min-Jae said, sitting down on the low wall beside her stand. "Both, probably," Hana agreed, laughing. Their conversations stretched longer each visit. He learned about Grandmother O, about the orphanage, about the way Hana counted her steps to navigate a city that had never been built with someone like her in mind. She learned about his father, about the business he'd inherited far too young, about the exhaustion of being surrounded by people who smiled at him and wanted something in return every single time. "You never ask me for anything," he told her one evening, the sky turning orange even though neither of them could fully appreciate the color the same way. "Should I?" Hana asked. "No," Min-Jae said quickly. "That's exactly why I like coming here." "You like coming here because a blind girl selling water doesn't want anything from you," Hana said, not unkindly, just observing. "That says more about the people around you than it does about me." He never told her who he really was, not the full truth of it, not the empire built on contracts signed in boardrooms during the day and enforced in alleyways at night. He let her believe he was simply a businessman, wealthy and busy, and she never pushed for more, because Hana had learned a long time ago that people revealed themselves in their own time, if they revealed themselves at all, and forcing the issue rarely ended well. What neither of them knew was that they were no longer alone in this. Seo-Rin had noticed the change in Min-Jae almost immediately. The way he canceled dinners with vague excuses, the way his phone buzzed with messages he smiled at before quickly locking the screen, the way he'd started asking his driver to take unusual routes through the city that led nowhere near any of his usual business. "Something's different about you," she said one evening, watching him across the dinner table of a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign outside. "I'm just tired," Min-Jae said. "The accident took more out of me than I expected." "It's been over a month," Seo-Rin said, her voice thin and sharp. "You should be back to normal by now." "I am normal," Min-Jae said, but even he heard how unconvincing it sounded. Seo-Rin said nothing more that night. But 3 days later, she had her driver follow him instead of taking her usual route home, and she watched from the tinted safety of her car window as Min-Jae, the man she'd been engaged to for 2 years, sat on a low concrete wall beside a street vendor's cart, laughing, actually laughing, freely, the way he never laughed with her, at something a blind woman in a faded blouse had just said. "Who is that?" Seo-Rin said quietly, not really a question, more a promise of violence to come. "Should I find out, Miss Seo-Rin?" her driver asked. "You don't need to find out," Seo-Rin said, her eyes narrowing as she watched Min-Jae reach out and gently steady the water cart when it started to tip. "I already know exactly what she is, a distraction, and distractions get removed." The next week, Hana noticed her earnings were consistently short, coins missing from the small lockbox she kept beneath her table, sachets disappearing overnight that she was certain she'd counted and secured before leaving. She assumed it was simple theft, the kind she'd grown resigned to over the years. She had no idea it was calculated. Seo-Rin never approached directly, not at first. She sent people, quiet, forgettable people who blended into crowds, to buy from Hana's stand and simply not pay, to knock over her cart when she wasn't looking and vanish before she could react, to spread quiet rumors among the other street vendors that Hana's water wasn't properly sealed, wasn't safe, driving away customers who might have otherwise been loyal. "Business has been strange lately," Hana mentioned to Min-Jae one evening, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. "I don't know, maybe I'm just being paranoid." "What do you mean strange?" "Sales are down. People keep telling me they heard something about my water being contaminated, which is ridiculous. I buy directly from the depot, nothing's changed. And things keep going missing that I know I secured. She shook her head, forcing a smile. It's probably nothing. Bad luck comes in waves sometimes. Min-Jae frowned, something uneasy settling in his chest, though he couldn't yet name why. Do you want me to look into it? No, Hana said quickly. I can handle it, I always have. He let it go, not realizing that the woman responsible for Hana's growing misfortune was the same woman waiting for him at home every night, smiling at him over dinner as though nothing at all had changed. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is only getting started. Hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss what's coming, because the war that's about to begin is going to change everything for everyone involved. Like this video if Seo-Rin already has you nervous, and comment below what you think she's going to do next. The tension built for weeks, escalating in ways Hana couldn't see but could absolutely feel a shift in the air around her stand, a coldness in strangers who had once been kind, a persistent sense that something larger than a string of bad luck was working against her. Then came the day with the water sachet, the one that opened this story, Seo-Rin, done hiding in the shadows, finally deciding to confront her rival directly, tearing open a sachet and pouring it over Hana's head in broad daylight, whispering her warning before disappearing into her luxury car. Hana didn't tell Min-Jae, not at first. She simply went home that night, changed out of her soaked clothes, and sat in the dark of her small room replaying the woman's voice in her head. Stay away from what's mine. She didn't know who the woman was. She didn't know why she'd been targeted, but something cold had settled into her chest, an instinct sharpened by a lifetime of navigating a world designed to overlook her, and that instinct told her this was only the beginning. It was Min-Jae, who noticed something was wrong the next time he visited. Hana, what happened to you? He asked, seeing, or rather, someone had to describe it to him, since he'd arrived just as she was toweling dry hair that had clearly been wet, the faint stress lines around her mouth, the way her hands trembled slightly as she counted change. Someone poured water on me yesterday, Hana said carefully. A woman, expensive car, expensive perfume. She said to stay away from what's hers. Min-Jae went very still. What did she look like? What did her voice sound like? I couldn't see her, Min-Jae, Hana reminded him gently. I only heard her, sharp voice, confident, cruel in a very practiced sort of way like she'd done it before. Something clicked into place in Min-Jae's mind, cold and horrible and undeniable. I have to go, he said abruptly, standing so fast he nearly knocked over her cart. Min-Jae, wait. But he was already walking away, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and furious in a way Hana had never heard from him before. That night, Min-Jae confronted Seo-Rin in the marble foyer of his family estate, his voice shaking with a rage he'd rarely allowed himself to feel in front of her. Did you do it? He said, not a question, a demand. Do what exactly? Seo-Rin asked, examining her nails with practiced disinterest. You know exactly what, Min-Jae said. The stand, Hana. Someone's been sabotaging her business for weeks, and yesterday someone poured water on her and threatened her. Was it you? Seo-Rin's expression finally shifted, the mask slipping just enough to reveal something sharp and dangerous underneath. And if it was? Seo-Rin. She's beneath you, Min-Jae, Seo-Rin snapped, closing the distance between them, her voice rising. A blind street vendor. Do you understand what people would say if they found out the heir to the Kang Empire was spending his evenings sitting on the curb with someone like that? You have an image to maintain, a legacy, and instead you're throwing it away for a charity case. She's not a charity case, Min-Jae said, his voice dangerously quiet now. She saved my life. She sat beside my hospital bed every single day for 3 weeks while you were too busy for 11 minutes. She's kind and honest, and she's never once asked me for a single thing, which is more than I can say for you. So this is it then, Seo-Rin said, her voice cracking with something that might have been genuine hurt buried beneath the fury. 2 years, Min-Jae. 2 years of building this future together, and you're going to throw it all away for a woman who can't even see your face. She sees more than you ever have, Min-Jae said, and the words landed like a blade. Seo-Rin's eyes went cold, all traces of hurt vanishing behind something far more dangerous. "You'll regret this." "I already regret staying this long," Min-Jae said, and he turned and walked out, leaving her standing alone in the marble foyer, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. He went straight to Hana's stand, even though it was well past dark, even though he knew she'd already closed up and gone home. He found her building, climbed the narrow stairs above the noodle shop, and knocked on her door with a kind of urgency that made her heart race before she even opened it. "Min-Jae, it's almost midnight, what's wrong?" "I ended it," he said, his breath still uneven from the confrontation, from the walk, from everything building inside him for weeks now. "With Seo-Rin, I ended the engagement." Hana stood frozen in her doorway. "Why would you tell me that right now?" "Because it was her," Min-Jae said. "She's the one who's been tormenting you. And because I realized something standing in that house, Hana. I don't think about her when I'm not there. I think about you. I've been thinking about you since the moment you told me to breathe in that hospital room, and I can't do this anymore, pretending it's just gratitude, pretending it's just friendship." "Min-Jae." "I love you," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them, raw and unpolished and utterly sincere. "I don't care that it doesn't make sense on paper. I don't care what anyone says about it. I love you, Hana, and I need you to know that before anything else happens." Hana's hands found the doorframe, steadying herself against a wave of emotion she hadn't expected to feel this powerfully. "You don't know everything about me," she said quietly. "You don't know how hard it would be. Your world and my world, they don't fit together, Min-Jae. People will laugh. They'll say you're wasting yourself on someone who can't even see the empire you're offering her." "I don't care what they say." "You will," Hana said. "Eventually, you will, and I don't want to be the reason you resent your own life." "Hana," he stepped closer, his voice softening, pleading now instead of declaring. "I have never in my entire life felt as safe as I do sitting beside your stand listening to you talk about a stranger's cat drawing. I have everything money can buy, and none of it has ever made me feel the way 5 minutes with you does. Please, don't send me away because you're scared of what people might say." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of the city, until Hana finally spoke, her voice trembling but certain. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Min-Jae, yes." He pulled her into his arms right there in the doorway, and for the first time since the accident, since the hospital, since everything that had brought them to this exact moment, neither of them said anything at all. They didn't need to. If this moment just made your heart ache in the best way, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe now, because you do not want to miss what happens at that wedding. Like this video, share it with someone who loves a good slow burn romance, because we are far from finished. The wedding was set for 6 weeks later, and Min-Jae spared no expense, though Hana insisted repeatedly that she needed none of it. "You don't have to do all this," she told him, standing in the middle of a boutique while a team of stylists fussed over a dress she couldn't see but could feel was extraordinary. Layers of silk, soft as water against her fingers. "I want to," Min-Jae said, watching her from across the room with an expression of quiet wonder that had become permanent since the night he proposed. "You spent your whole life with people taking from you. I want to spend the rest of mine giving to you instead." "You're going to spoil me," Hana said, laughing. "That's the plan," he replied. The church was filled that morning with more wealth and power than most of the guests would ever see gathered in one room again. Business partners, distant relatives, people who'd never once acknowledged Min-Jae's existence beyond a handshake now sitting in polished pews, eager to witness the wedding of the season. Hana stood at the back of the church, her hand resting lightly on the arm of an usher who would guide her down the aisle, in place of the family she'd never had, her heart pounding with a mixture of joy and disbelief that any of this was real. "You look beautiful," the usher whispered to her. "He's not going to be able to breathe when he sees you." "I wish I could see him too," Hana admitted quietly. "Just once, just to know what he looks like when he smiles at me." "Trust me," the usher said gently. "You don't need to see it to know." The doors opened. The music began, and Hana walked forward, one careful step at a time, guided by sound and instinct and the overwhelming feeling of a room full of eyes turning toward her, toward the blind street vendor about to marry into an empire. She was halfway down the aisle when she heard it, the screech of tires outside, doors slamming, a commotion rippling through the crowd behind her that had nothing to do with tradition or ceremony. The church doors burst open. "Stop the wedding," Seo-Rin's voice rang out, cold and clear across the stunned silence of the church, footsteps echoing as she strode down the center aisle in a gown as striking as any bride's, flanked by men whose presence made the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "Stop this wedding right now." Gasps rippled through the pews. Min-Jae stepped forward from the altar, his face draining of color. "Seo-Rin, what are you doing?" "What am I doing?" she repeated, laughing, a sound with no warmth left in it at all. "I'm doing what I should have done weeks ago. Did you really think I'd just disappear quietly? Did you really think you could humiliate me, throw away 2 years, throw away everything we built for her?" She turned, finally, to look directly at Hana, who stood frozen at the center of the aisle, unable to see the venom in Seo-Rin's expression, but feeling every ounce of it in her voice. "You have no idea what you've done," Seo-Rin said to her, quiet now, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You have no idea what world you just walked into." "Seo-Rin, this is between you and me," Min-Jae said, moving to stand protectively in front of Hana. "Leave her out of it." "She stopped being out of it the moment you chose her over everything I represent," Seo-Rin said. Then she looked past him, directly at Min-Jae, her voice dropping into something low and final, something that silenced the entire church. "If I can't have you," she said, "no one will." The black SUVs outside the church doors, engines still running, seemed to pulse with the same quiet threat as her words. Nobody in that church moved. Nobody breathed. The wedding, seconds away from beginning, hung suspended in the terrible silence that followed, and Hana stood at the center of it all, unable to see the danger closing in around her but feeling it in every fiber of her being, the unmistakable sense that whatever war had just been declared was only getting started, and that it would follow them far beyond the walls of this church. The screen cuts to black. The wedding remains unfinished. Kang Min-Jae's world, once hidden from the woman who loved him without ever needing to see his face, has just cracked wide open, and Seo-Rin has made her intentions terrifyingly clear. This is only the beginning of the war between them. If you want to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on, because part 2 is coming and it is going to be even more intense than everything you just watched. Drop a comment telling me what you think Seo-Rin is going to do next, and if this story had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now and share it with someone who needs a story like this in their life. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I'll see you in part 2.